Hey everyone, welcome to a little showcase on the progress of Magewire V3. So it's been a couple of weeks since MageTitans 2024 in Groningen happened. I was lucky enough to be able to attend it and also speak. My talk was about Magewire V3, obviously. First time I showed something related to V3, and I thought it's time to at least also show you what's in stock. I think V3 is the version we always wanted, and yeah, just to give you guys a first glimpse of what's coming. I would like to run through the presentation, like a shorter version of the presentation I gave at MageTitans, and afterwards try to give a little demo on some features that are new in relation to V1. So yeah, this was my my opening screen, and yeah, my name is Willem. I'm the creator of Magewire V1, the only version of Magewire that currently exists. I'm a senior developer and solution architect at Huva, where I'm mainly responsible for the architecture and building Huva Checkout. Magewire V3, a first glimpse. So back in 2023, during MageTitans UK, I also was lucky enough to be able to speak there about, well, it was a bit of a different topic, but still the main subject was Magewire. And during that talk, I asked the audience three questions. So who does not know Magewire PHP, who does but never used it, and who does and also uses it? So back then the results were, well, I expected such a result, but still, yeah, you would like to have more adopters using Magewire. But yeah, obviously in our community it's a little bit more difficult to integrate something new. Let's call it something new. Also, as soon as you start talking about HTTP requests, which is kind of the foundation of Magewire, in relation to Magento, people, like, the first thought people have is like, okay, that's gonna be pretty slow because yeah, Magento needs to like boot during every request. And yes, that is true, but I think with the right innovation, yeah, I think it's still pretty fast. And even in V3, it was one of the main goals I had during the build, is to make those HTTP requests as fast as I could. So yeah, back to the drawing board, and yeah, I tried to come up with a better solution to make those requests faster. Obviously, some limitations were there, but yeah, I think the results that I'm gonna show you in a minute are speaking for themselves. Anyway, yeah, so 50, 35, and 15. So during that talk, I asked the same three questions once again, and luckily enough and happy enough, the results were the opposite. So yeah, my marketing strategy, if I even have a marketing strategy for this open source project, but anyway, something seems to be working. I think a good part of that is thanks to Huva Checkout, because the primary engine behind Huva Checkout is Magewire V1, and I think most Magento developers who work with Huva and started to work with Huva Checkout got to know Magewire, and I think because of that, other people also start to use it for like product configurators, like whatever dynamic component you're trying to build. I think 50% of those cases Magewire is being used. So, but yeah, that's just a wild guess. But anyway, happy with those results. So Magewire explained in a few words. Obviously, it's a Magento module. You can download it using Composer, Magewire PHP /Magewire. It's open source, MIT licensed, so everyone can use it in their hobby projects or commercial projects. It's a port of Laravel Livewire. So back in the day, when I was working with Laravel Livewire, this really kickstarted the idea of having the same results within Magento. So for me it was really an eye opener when I first played around with Livewire. I immediately had the idea of we really need this in the Magento community, because it's so easy to use, especially for backend developers, creating dynamic components using just PHP and PHTML or HTML, whatever you prefer, without really needing any JavaScript. And yeah, I thought that was really powerful. So that's where the initial idea comes from. As said, it's the primary engine behind Huva Checkout. So most dynamic interaction is because of Magewire. For example, if you move from step A to step B, that's all being handled by Magewire. Put it in a sentence and you get like a framework that enables building dynamic reactive user interfaces in Magento without writing JavaScript. Now, you can use JavaScript in combination with Magewire if you like, but yeah, primarily you don't have to use it. It allows developers to create components that handle UI interactions through server logic using PHP. And yeah, that's, for me as a backend developer, that's very powerful and something I always wanted to have within Magento. So yeah, happy I managed to build it. Little side joke. Simply stated, it's Alpine.js for PHP developers. So V3, the journey. It's been a while. I've been working on it for at least 6 months now. So on and off, obviously, mostly in the evenings or during the weekends. It's taking a lot of time and effort, and it's sometimes difficult to prioritize things, but I'm really trying to put in as much time as I can to make V3 happen. And I really think V3 is the version that we always wanted. So yeah, that excites me even more to put time into it. Obviously, I have some sponsors, which I'm very thankful for. And because of that financial support, it makes it somewhat easier to put in time, because yeah, those sponsors really appreciate what I'm doing, and they appreciate the tools that I'm bringing to the Magento community, and that's like the primary feedback that I'm getting, which is pretty cool. And I think having sponsors for such a big open source project is something necessary, and I think to drive innovation within our community, yeah, other people should also have some sponsors to at least pay the bills and yeah, make it more enjoyable in terms of yeah, putting in time. So retrospective, mistakes and learnings. So during the build of V1, I didn't really know what I was doing. That sounds a bit silly, but yeah, I just had one goal, and this goal was to make it happen within Magento. Wasn't really thinking about an architecture. Came up with some key solutions that I could take into V3 as well. But apart from that, yeah, with V1, I didn't really think about the correct architecture, and in the end, that made it pretty difficult to come up with like the more advanced features that Laravel Livewire provides. Just to give you an example, the upload component, that was pretty difficult to port into Magewire V1. I gave it a try, but yeah, in the end, you just run into a couple of walls, and it's difficult to breach those, to break through and come up with like solutions that are solid and are future proof. So eventually I abandoned that project. And yeah, I got that with multiple features, which I would really like to have in Magewire, but it was just not possible to build it because of the architecture. Yeah, my goals. So I gained a lot of knowledge and experience during the years using Magewire, especially within the Huva checkout. And because of that, I really thought that some things needed to change in order to make V3 happen. One of them, and I think that's the biggest one, is trying to stick to the architecture that Livewire provides instead of trying to form or maybe transform that architecture into something different, and getting on the old road, so to speak. So yeah, that was my main goal, to keep as close to the architecture of Livewire as I could. Obviously, that means that I'm not everywhere I'm close to what Magento requires from me. In a sense, like I'm not using every best practice of Magento, which for some developers will sound like ugly. But in the end, if you peel off the leaves, it makes sense, or at least it made sense to me. So yeah, that was one of the primary goals. To reach that, I needed to do a lot of research. So I think I spent over a month researching Livewire V3. really trying to understand what is going on. So my experience in Laravel is not the biggest. I know my thing, but yeah, I'm not an experienced Laravel developer. Still, I try to put one and one together, and yeah, really try to understand how the architecture worked. I think in the end, I have looking back at it, I have a pretty good idea on how it's structured and why it's structured in the way it's structured. And I think I did a pretty good job transforming that to Magento. So yeah, I stayed very close to the architecture of Livewire, and because of that, we get the benefits of making it much easier to upgrade to like a newer version when it comes out, and also because of that, porting features, like new features or maybe existing features, yeah, it simply becomes a lot easier because the two are very similar. So my development basically started from scratch. I used a couple of things from Magewire V1, but because of the architecture, it was easier to start from scratch. I'm not too worried about backwards incompatibility, because if you use Magewire the right way, you don't really require the core. And because of that, most of the things you use is the syntaxing in the front end, like the wire colon stuff within your HTML. The Magewire variable that you can use within your block templates. And obviously the PHP component itself. And those all stay the same. So upgrading to V3 should be quite straightforward if you didn't really dove into the core and changed things within the core. Then upgrading to V3 should be fairly straightforward. So during that development, and this is already a couple of months back, I spoke to Jisse from Urio, and together we organized 2 hackathons. So the first one was a bit you learn as you go. So a couple of enthusiastic people came to the Urio office in Baarn, and yeah, that's where I first showed people Magewire V3, and I spoke a little about the architecture, but quite frankly, it was too difficult to install it back then. I think that's because of it was still in development. I think that's the main reason. So I think a couple of weeks later we had a second hackathon, and during those weeks I was able to come up with like a stabler or maybe a stable version, which was easier to install. And because of that, we could have some good conversations on a couple of topics that I had in terms of architecture and some walls I was hitting. And we had a good conversation, and we got some good, or I got some good feedback. And during that hackathon, I met I already met Justin, and And I met Justin at a different how do you call that? It was a Magento event, so to speak. And Justin was exciting enough that he also joined the hackathon. And he lives close by where I live. And because of that, in the end of the day, he drove back with me in the car. And because we live close by and we had like a 2-hour drive. And I said, yeah, you can drive with me back to your place. And during that car drive, we spoke about a couple of conversations we had during the day. And we came up with some ideas of having like a tool that would really help porting features from Livewire to Magewire. And yeah, I quite frankly, I said to Justin, like, I'm not able to build this tool. It would be amazing to have, but I simply don't have the time to build it. And we left it there as like being an idea that probably will not never see daylight. And yeah, a couple of weeks later, Justin DM'd me. I think it was on Discord. And suddenly he came up with Portman, which is the primary tool that we're using to port features from Laravel Livewire to Magewire. I'm not gonna dive into it too much, but simply stated, it merges code from the Laravel Livewire package to like a dist folder, and you're able to, in a separate folder, you're able to create customizations for instance, a class. And this tool recognizes like the customizations that you made, and it will sprinkle that on top of the existing Laravel Livewire stuff. And those two combined create the overall distribution. That's why the dist folder. And yeah, because of that, we reuse most of Laravel Livewire's code with only the necessary changes needed for Magento. So yeah, let's do a little demo. We're already more than 20 minutes in. So yeah, I'm gonna present a little demo. I'm gonna try to make it as clear as possible without showing any IDE code like within my PHP Storm, but hopefully it makes sense. So let's refresh and let's move to the top. Yeah, parent and children blocks. So within V1, if you had like two components where the wrapping component has a child component, where if you made a change to the parent component and the child component, like for instance, this child B, it now has a value 50. And if I change that value to 51, if I didn't save this somewhere, like for instance within a session or within the database, or well, think of a storage, and you would update the parent to, for instance, from 19 to 20, then it would overwrite obviously the HTML of its child components, resetting the state of that child component because it simply wasn't saved anywhere. In V3, that's now solved. So it's no longer overriding the state of its child components. So if I change, for instance, child C, and now I'm going up to the parent and I'm changing that as well, then during the HTTP request, it does a round trip to the server. It comes back with new HTML for only the parent component, but it merges in a pretty smart way. It merges whatever changed to the component. So obviously this changed because normally the state of child B is 50, but we changed it to 51. So normally that would make Magewire remerge the state and put it back to 50, but within V3 that now stays 51, as you may expect. So yeah, that's a pretty big improvement, and I'm really happy that this is now possible because, yeah, simply stated, it makes our lives a lot easier using parent-child components. So yeah, I built in some funky features like, hey, confirm with a flash message. So I'm now updating this, and as soon as I hit this button, it shows me the value that is being used within the input. For those who used Magewire previously, this is pretty straightforward, but yeah, it's the cool thing about it is this is all server-sided. So writing these examples, 0 lines of JavaScript have been used. And I think that's very powerful because, yeah, Magento really is built for, yeah, if you want to make changes from an outsider's perspective, you can do so using like plugins and overriding templates and stuff. And from a JavaScript perspective, that's much harder, much more difficult. So yeah, it's that's really a powerful thing in the end. Yeah, showing behind the scenes. So this is all pretty straightforward. We have like a public function increment. It increments whatever the current value is. So by default it's 0, and we're simply incremented with 1 as soon as the increment button is being triggered, right? So behind this button is a wire click increment. So what's new in V3? Well, first of all, this is very powerful. If you use JavaScript, you can now use the magic parent getter, which provides you the parent component. And if you're in component child B and you want to trigger a function that lives in parent A, then simply you simply use the $parent. And this is simply the method that lives in, like the PHP method that lives in the parent component. So yeah, from a parent-child perspective, this is very useful because previously in V1 this wasn't possible, and you needed to make some pretty tricky solutions to make it happen. And yeah, now you simply use $parent. So that's very powerful. Yeah, so the Magewire variable was only available for your component template. So your block has a template and you transform that block into a Magewire component, then automatically the Magewire variable becomes available only within that template. So if you wanted to separate stuff into like multiple templates, which makes it easier for others to like change little things within like a component, because you orchestrate it more in a like with multiple templates, which is a good thing to do. So in V1, if you wanted to use the Magewire variable that gave you access to like the PHP component, you needed to like pass along the Magewire variable to the child block, which was very time consuming, first of all, but secondly, it wasn't really practical. And so I decided to change that. So now if you have like a Magewire component template and you're using child templates or child blocks, which are, and that's an important thing, which aren't Magewire components, then that Magewire variable will be passed along with the block automatically. So yeah, I think that's very powerful. So for instance, if you have like a block here, which becomes a Magewire component, and it has its own template, then in V1 only this template had access to the PHP Magewire variable, and as soon as you had this child block with its own template, then simply said you didn't have the access to this variable, and now you automatically have. So that's very powerful. Think of when you're building like a form component with multiple templates rendering different stuff, but you still want to access the component, like the global parent component. That now becomes a lot easier to access, like variables that are sitting within that component. So very useful. Public properties and mount arguments. This is subject to change. I probably will change this into Magewire : and then mount or : boot, making it possible to inject variables that are required for the mount or the boot method. So at the time when I'm recording this is only possible for the mount method, but obviously you want to also use it within the boot method. So think of like dependency injection for your constructor. The same logic now applies to the boot and the mount method, and you can inject those variable values using layout XML. So as soon as it has a Magewire argument, you simply say Magewire : mount.firstName, and then the value will be injected into the mount method when you have like mount. You can see it here. So we have our first name and our last name, and we want to change the first name as soon as the component mounts. Then, simply it requires a first name. We're injecting that through layout XML, becoming like a different first name. That's how I call it mount dependency injection. Obviously, there will become a boot dependency injection. Front-end throttling. So this is like the first line of defense in terms of make it possible to like reject multiple HTTP requests to your server when someone clicks a button or changes an input value. So you can simply apply a wire throttle, even change the hold up, like the debounce time. And yeah, from a front-end perspective, Magewire will not make a request to the server, and will hold until the throttling ended. By default, that's 5 seconds. And then you're able to click the button again, and it will then do a server request. Now, I have to state this is just a first line of defense, and smart people can remove the wire throttling, and because of that, you're able to spam a button and make multiple requests to the server. So there will be a server-sided throttling mechanism as well, but for the ease of making it available on the front end, I think this is very powerful to have. Just give you the tools to at least do something against button spamming. And using this just in your HTML is one, easy to implement, and two, it's just powerful to have. As explained, preserves child data. So that's what I explained with the parent and child components. So I'm not going to dive any deeper into that. Flash messages, this one is pretty straightforward. So I just built a little example here. We want to dispatch an error message. This is all server-side driven. So hello world, if we change this to hi, like that, and we want to make it a notice, then obviously we have a little notice message with the value that we provided. Some little funky features like server, please say hi. So as soon as let's remove this, and let's create a success message and dispatch flash message. So then, simply it will paste an additional sentence after what we filled in. We can also listen to certain events. So if I enable this, then listen to root parent A button click and show the input value as a flash message. So to make it a little bit more complex, but I think people want to have this, let's change this to 1, 2, 3, and let's enable this. And as soon as I now click this button, which is a totally separate component, then in the different, in the other component I just showed with the checkboxes, there is a listener that is listening for an event that happens within this component that you're currently seeing. What will happen is simply show a flash message with the value that we injected into this input using the type that we selected. So if we use warning and we go up again and we click it again, then obviously you get it in a warning message. So that's very powerful. Let's see behind the scenes. So this is all pretty straightforward. Nothing really changed from a Magewire V1 perspective. What's new? Well, it's now possible to listen for events with attributes. So these are function attributes. And you simply, as soon as this event is being dispatched, so you can see here, this is component A, foo is dispatching an event foo, providing some parameters, And yeah, if you want, so in component B, if you want to then trigger some functionality using those parameters, you can by simply adding the on attribute, listening for foo, and then it will simply dispatch whatever you put within your method. Also, that's possible from a JavaScript perspective. So if you want to trigger something within your JavaScript, you can simply say magewire.on and then the event, and well, whatever you prefer will be executed. So that's very powerful. This was already within V1, and this is completely new and very powerful. Batch requests. So let's speed things up here. Batch requests, I need to open up a networking tab, and let's go to network. So it now, as soon as multiple components are listening for a single event, like I showed here, previously each component on its own would make a new request to the backend, refetching itself or like adding new data to the server, coming back with like a fresh result for each component. That would mean that if we had this example in V1, we have a parent. So this is a wrapping parent component with a couple of child components, that as soon as I fired this event, there would be an additional 3 requests for each component. That is no longer the case. So what it now does is, as soon as I fire the parent, it will then return with a response, which includes an event. Then on the front end, it's checking like which components are listening for this particular event. It sees that 3 components are listening for it, and it will batch those components into a single request, which is obviously a lot more efficient because, yeah, we simply have to boot Magento once instead of 3 times. Yeah, it's just very, very efficient. Let me just demonstrate this. So as you can see, we have our first update request, which is for our parent component. And this component triggers an event. So it fires an event, and because of that event, 3 other components are listening for it. So it makes another HTTP request. As you can see, let's make this a little bit bigger. We have now 3 components within that single request, and they all have their own update request coming back with like a response. And also in the response, we now have 3 components, and they're just updating themselves. So in this response, this is for the parent. We have some effects. Within the effects, we have our dispatches object, and it simply dispatches batch request, and these children are listening for this event, and then simply updating themselves to a new state. So there's a little randomizer for the color of the button. So as soon as I, for instance, deactivate these 2, and let's deactivate these 2, and let's deactivate that one. So as soon as I now hit the parent button again, then these buttons can only update their background color to whatever is enabled within that component. So let's do that now. Let's clear up the queue. And as you can see, this button becomes red, this blue, and this yellow. So as soon as we now also allow yellow here, and we do the same thing, let's click it a couple of times. And as you can see, the first component now also is able to become a yellow button. yeah, let's see behind the scenes. So this is pretty familiar. You have a dispatch with the event name. Optionally, you can provide some additional arguments. And again, we have our on batch request. So component B is being used 3 times, where we simply state within layout XML that shared is false. And then these components become their own separate instances. So yeah, you can simply reuse a component for multiple children if you like. Another exciting thing, so in V1 we already had loaders and notifications. So within V3 that's being extended a little bit further. So by default we had our, let's remove the networking tab. So as soon as I change this, you have like your loader notification with like a loading spinner as long as the network request takes, and after it's fully made the round trip, it will show you a little success marker. Now within V3, we extended that quite a bit. So let me just demonstrate what is now possible. So we're having a loader target here. So the target reflects what example we're using. So count input is obviously this one. We have our checkbox input and a text input. So let's change this to checkbox input. And if we then toggle, then simply it will use this value as the notification. And as you can see, that notification automatically hides after 3.5 seconds. But we can now change this. So we say hello world. And as soon as we now disable it, enable it, it will simply show hello world. Now, the cool thing is when we change this, we can now inject or use the value. So let's use the value within the pattern. So as soon as I now disable or enable, it will simply say true or false. So you can reuse the value that it's updating to. Obviously, you want to use the previous value. So for instance, we could say moving from previous to value. And as soon as I now toggle this, moving from true to false, moving from false to true. This is useful for some cases, not for every case, because if you want to translate this, true and false could be translated into like whatever language you prefer. I think it's more useful for like text inputs. But yeah, you can think of your own use case. I think it's very powerful to have at least. But there are some more patterns. So if you want to give this a title, so let's just simply state my title. So we simply do my title colon. And then we switch it. As you can see, now the notification gets a little title, including the same message. Now, as you can see, this notification stays here as long as I hover around with the mouse. And as soon as I leave the notification, then after 3.5 seconds, it will automatically disappear. So that's a bit more user-friendly if you want to like really read what the notification has to say. You simply hover over it or enter the notification balloon and it will stay there as long as you need it. Now, one other cool pattern is, so this message is now being shown as long as the request takes. So when we change, for instance, the networking throttling to 3G, it will obviously take a little bit longer. So when I now change it, you can see the loading spinner takes a little longer, and after the request finishes, yeah, it simply shows you the check marker. Now, it could be handy to show a message during the request, but maybe you also want to show a message after the request happened. Now, this is now possible within Magewire V3 using a pattern including 3 dots. And after these 3 dots, you can inject a message that needs to be shown after the request happened. So let's say finished. So this is now transferred to the backend, and yeah, if we now change it, then you see it's loading, and afterwards we have our finished sentence notification. Now, as you could see, it uses the title twice that you gave it. I'm still not sure if this is the way I'm going. Maybe I want to change this. At least it is possible to give this a separate title, and if it doesn't have a title and the first one had, then it will reuse that title for the second message as well. So you can give this its own title, and yeah, as soon as the request happened, it will use that title and that message for the second notification balloon. Now, I hear you think, is this also possible to just give a notification when the request happened and not during the request? Obviously, that is possible. So we simply prefix it with ... space. And yeah, now when I clear the queue and we toggle this again, we only get the notification after the request finished. So yeah, that is possible. Pretty nifty little pattern to have. Pretty easy, and obviously you need to see this as you have your loader variable, protected variable within your Magewire PHP class. See this notification pattern as the value that you give to your variable. Maybe when I show what's going on with more context, it makes it a bit more clear. Just to give you a bit more examples, we can also switch to free input. So let's put this back to no throttling, and we can remove that. Now we have a free input, and this is basically the key that you're giving that you're providing within your array. So for toggle, which reflects this checkbox, we want to show a message after the update happened. Let's change this to busy and finished. Now, when I change this, we have busy and finished. What I also can do is changing the toggle to toggle true. And then it simply will only show the notification when the toggle is true. So as you can see, when I disable it, no messages appear. When I enable it, messages appear. So you can now specifically value base notifications for your public variables. So let's dive into what's going on behind the scenes. So this is all pretty familiar if you used V1. You have your protected loader array, and this is the method. So we have this method reflects this public variable, and as soon as this changes, then it will show this message. And this message was the same as what we used here. This key was the same as what we used here. So yeah, that makes it very, very flexible to very precisely show messages for the specific use case you're using. Now this is for a public variable, and obviously you can also use this for any functions that you're triggering. So if you have like a function, public function foo, and you change this into foo, then you can simply show a message as soon as that method is being triggered from the front end. Now, what's new in V3? Well, obviously, this will give a better insight of what I meant. Foo is a boolean. By default, it's true. And as soon as we change it to false, then we simply say busy disabling foo. As soon as it becomes true again, busy enabling foo. Notifications by given value. So you can simply use the value within your message. Previous, same goes for this, changing value from previous to value. Using a title, well, this is how you provide a title. Simply use a start of a sentence, including a colon, and then the message you want to show. Here are some examples on different use cases for the loader. So show after the request completed. That's this, starting with 3 dots. Show while the request is happening. That's how it already was, also within V1. Show before and after requests separated by a ... That's how you do that. So foo is syncing ... foo synced successfully. Using a title, both will use the same title. So this is subject to change. I'm not sure yet. But yeah, when you provide a title and the second sentence doesn't have a title, it will simply reuse this title. Now, from a JavaScript perspective, you can also use the Magewire notification plugin. It's built in a way that if you want to reuse the power of like the little notification balloon, it's all separate from each other. So you can also use this within like different JavaScript stuff. You can use it combining with Alpine.js. So yeah, it's the architecture behind it is pretty how do you call that? Well, let's call it separate. It's separated into different things, and if you want to like show it a notification within your Alpine component, you simply say magewire.plugins.notifier, and then you have multiple functions. Obviously, you want to use the create function, and then you can simply create a notification. A little tic-tac-toe. Let's not dive into this too much. It's a little game I built within, I think, 15 to 30 minutes. Yeah, player 2 now needs to choose. Player 1 needs to choose. Player 2 needs to choose again. Let's go for this one. Player 1 can win. And as soon as player 1 wins, we have a winner. Congratulations, player 1. Now, this is all PHP driven. To build this, I didn't use any JavaScript. Just some regular PHP and a bit of HTML, and all the dynamicness, let's call it like that, is being handled by Magewire. Yeah, it's all pretty straightforward, not too difficult. Cool. Back to the slideshow. So this was the demo. What's next? Now, development continues, meaning I will do my best to at least come up with a stable version, hopefully this year, and we're talking about 2024. If that's not happening, then I'm aiming for January, because in February I will become a father for the first time. So yeah, I'm pretty excited about that, and obviously that will take a lot of time away from me not being able to put into Magewire. So yeah, the goal is really to come up with at least an alpha or a beta version this year, and otherwise in January. Yeah, big thanks for my sponsors. I generally think this wouldn't be possible without them, so I didn't even think about starting with V3 if I didn't have the financial backup. So yeah, thanks to Fendic01 and M Academy. Yeah, this is possible, and I'm always looking for new sponsors, because the bigger the financial support, the more time I can put into it. Some secondary sponsors: Custom Gento, Coding NL, O3. Yeah, thank you for the support. This was my presentation. I hope it was fruitful. I think I'm gonna do more of these in regards to maybe how the merging tool that Justin built works. Maybe some other exciting features that are coming to V3. I'm not sure yet. Thanks for watching. If you have any questions, please leave them in the comments, and I will try to reply as soon as possible. Yeah, thanks again, and we'll talk soon. Thank you.